The Painter's Journey. In the bustling city of Venice, where art and water intertwined, there lived a young man named Angelo Moretti. Born into a family of merchants, his future was supposed to follow the path of trade and commerce, but Angelo's heart belonged to colors and canvases. While his father discussed business deals and shipments, Angelo spent his time sketching the gondolas gliding over the canals, the bustling markets, and the ever-changing sky. His mother, gentle but pragmatic, often warned him, "Art is beauty, my son, but beauty does not always fill an empty stomach." Yet, Angelo could not ignore the call of his passion. Every evening, after fulfilling his duties at the family shop, he would retreat to the attic, where he painted under the flickering light of a single candle. His hands were steady, his mind brimming with visions, but he lacked the refinement of a true master. One fateful day, Venice welcomed a renowned artist, Maestro Vittorio Rossi, whose frescoes adorned the halls of kings and cathedrals. The city buzzed with excitement, and Angelo saw his chance. He waited outside the artist's studio for days, hoping for a moment to speak with him. But each time he approached, he was turned away by the maestro's stern apprentices. Determined, Angelo devised a plan. He gathered his best work, a collection of portraits and cityscapes, and left them at the doorstep of the studio. Days passed, and just when hope began to dwindle, an invitation arrived. Maestro Rossi had summoned him. Inside the grand studio, the old painter studied Angelo's work in silence before speaking. "You have raw talent, but talent without discipline is like a ship without a compass. If you wish to be great, you must first be willing to unlearn and begin again." Thus began Angelo's arduous journey. He cleaned brushes, mixed pigments, and observed the maestro's every stroke. Weeks turned into months, months into years. Under Rossi's tutelage, he learned the secrets of light and shadow, the delicacy of blending colors, and most importantly, the art of patience. One evening, as he worked on a piece under Rossi's watchful eye, the maestro nodded in approval. "Now, you are ready. Paint not for the world's approval but for the truth within your heart." With this blessing, Angelo set out to make his mark. He painted the unseen beauty of Venice, the weary boatman at dawn, the quiet sorrow in a merchant's eyes, the fleeting joy of a child chasing pigeons in the square. His work spoke of life, love, and loss, capturing emotions too deep for words. His paintings began to draw attention. Nobles commissioned his work, galleries sought his pieces, and soon, his name was whispered with admiration across the city. But fame did not change him. He remained the boy who once painted in a candlelit attic, chasing the colors of his dreams. Years later, as he stood before his greatest masterpiece, he thought of his journey, the struggles, the lessons, and the endless pursuit of beauty. With a quiet smile, he picked up his brush once more, knowing that the true artist never stops searching for the next great story to tell. The Painter's Secret. In the heart of Florence, where Renaissance whispers filled the air and the scent of oil paint lingered in narrow alleyways, there stood an ancient art studio known only to a few. It belonged to Alessandro Bianchi, a gifted but elusive painter who had once dazzled the world with his breathtaking works until one day, he vanished without a trace. For years, rumors swirled. Some claimed he had died in obscurity, others believed he had gone mad, while a few whispered of a final, unfinished masterpiece that held a terrible secret. The mystery remained unsolved until Isabella Conti, a young art historian, stumbled upon an old diary hidden within the archives of the Uffizi Gallery. The diary belonged to Alessandro himself. Intrigued, Isabella pored over its pages, which spoke of a grand painting, a work unlike any other. His words hinted at regret, obsession, and a truth he feared revealing. Determined to uncover the painting's whereabouts, Isabella traced the clues to a forgotten estate on the outskirts of Florence, where Alessandro had once lived. The villa, though abandoned, retained the echoes of its past. Dust and decay covered its once opulent walls, but amidst the ruin, Isabella found a locked room. After carefully prying open the door, she stepped inside and gasped. A massive canvas, shrouded in a thick linen sheet, stood at the center. She reached out, heart pounding, and pulled the sheet away. Before her was an exquisite yet unsettling painting, a portrait of a woman, draped in an ethereal gown, her gaze hauntingly lifelike. But what sent shivers down Isabella's spine was the unmistakable sorrow in her eyes, as though she were silently pleading for help. Who was this woman? Determined to find answers, Isabella scoured the estate and uncovered letters hidden in a wooden chest. They revealed the woman's identity: Lucia Ferretti, Alessandro's greatest muse and, some believed, his forbidden love. According to the letters, she had mysteriously vanished the same year Alessandro disappeared. As Isabella examined the painting closer, she noticed something peculiar: subtle cracks along its edges. When she carefully illuminated the surface with a special light, hidden brush strokes emerged beneath the layers of paint. Faint words appeared at the bottom: asterisk, she is here. Asterisk. A chill ran down her spine. What did Alessandro mean? Had he hidden something within the painting itself? With expert restorers, Isabella conducted a deeper analysis. What they uncovered left them breathless. Beneath the top layer of paint was another portrait, one more disturbing than the first. It was still Lucia, but her expression was one of pure terror, her mouth open as if screaming. The strokes were wild, frenzied, unlike Alessandro's usual mastery. It was as if he had been painting in a fit of desperation. The discovery sent Isabella down a darker path. She scoured historical records and found chilling evidence: Lucia had not simply vanished. She had been reported missing, and whispers at the time suggested foul play. No body was ever found, and Alessandro had never been seen again. Was it possible that the truth had been hidden in plain sight all along? As the restoration continued, another revelation emerged. Embedded within the canvas was a small, aged parchment sealed with wax. When Isabella carefully unrolled it, she found a final, harrowing confession. Alessandro had loved Lucia deeply, but their love had been forbidden. One night, during a heated argument, she had threatened to leave him forever. In a moment of blind despair, he had tried to stop her. The struggle turned fatal. Overcome with guilt, he had done the only thing he knew how: he had immortalized her on canvas, trapping her within his art, his penance painted stroke by stroke. And then, unable to bear the weight of his crime, he had disappeared into the shadows of history. Isabella felt a mix of horror and sorrow. She had uncovered the truth, but at what cost? The painting was no longer just art, it was evidence of a tragic obsession, a love turned to madness. The painting was moved to the Uffizi Gallery, displayed under the name Asterisk, the painter's secret. Asterisk art lovers from around the world marveled at its beauty, unaware of the dark tale behind it. And as Isabella stood before the painting, she could almost hear the whispers of the past, the silent confession of a man who had lost everything for the sake of his art. The colors of a dream. In a small village nestled between rolling hills and winding rivers, there lived a young woman named Isabella Fiori. Unlike the others in her town, who spent their days tending to fields or weaving fabrics, Isabella had a different calling: she painted. From the moment she could hold a brush, she saw the world in hues and strokes, in colors that spoke louder than words. Her father, a strict blacksmith, believed that art was nothing but a distraction. The world needs iron, not paintings, he would often grumble. Her mother, though softer in her disapproval, reminded her that a woman's place was in a home, not behind an easel. Yet, Isabella could not ignore the fire within her. She found solace in the meadows outside the village, where she painted the golden sun rising over the fields, the quiet murmur of the river, and the occasional traveler who passed by. Her only companion was her younger brother, Luca, who admired her work and often snuck into their father's workshop to bring her leftover scraps of wood to use as canvases. One day, a traveling artist, Signore Matteo, stopped by the village to rest. He noticed Isabella painting by the river and watched in fascination. When he approached her, she shrank back, embarrassed by her makeshift materials and simple clothing. But he saw what others did not: the passion in her strokes, the depth in her colors. "You have a gift, Signorina," he said. "One that should not be hidden." He invited her to study under him in Florence, where art thrived, but Isabella hesitated. She knew her father would never allow it, and the idea of leaving her family behind filled her with guilt. Yet, deep inside, she longed to see the great cathedrals, the towering statues, the masterpieces she had only heard about in whispers. That night, she confided in Luca. "What if I go, and I fail?" Her brother, young but wise, smiled. "What if you go, and you don't?" With newfound courage, she left before dawn, carrying only a satchel of brushes and dreams. The journey to Florence was long and arduous, but when she arrived, the sight of the city's grand buildings and bustling markets took her breath away. Under Matteo's mentorship, Isabella's skills blossomed. She learned to mix pigments, to capture light, to bring emotion to life on canvas. She painted not just what she saw, but what she felt: the longing for home, the joy of discovery, the quiet resilience of the human spirit. Word of her talent spread, and soon, noble families requested portraits, and galleries sought her work. Yet, despite her success, she never forgot the village she had left behind, nor the little brother who had believed in her before anyone else. Years later, she returned home, no longer the hesitant girl with stolen scraps of wood, but a celebrated artist. She found Luca waiting at the same river where she had once painted, his eyes filled with pride. "You went," he said simply. She smiled, setting up her easel. "And now, I paint our home." For the first time, her father watched as she worked, saying nothing, but with a quiet understanding in his gaze. And as Isabella's brush moved across the canvas, she realized that art was not just about distant dreams, it was about bringing them back to where they began. The forgotten colors. In a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and golden wheat fields, there stood an old stone cottage with ivy creeping up its walls. Inside, the air smelled of turpentine and aged wood, and unfinished canvases leaned against every surface. This was the home of Eleanor Vance, an artist who had once been celebrated in the grand galleries of Europe but had not painted a single stroke in 20 years. No one knew why Eleanor had abandoned her craft. Some whispered she had lost her muse, others believed she had gone blind, and a few claimed she had simply forgotten how to create. Whatever the truth was, Eleanor never spoke of it. She lived in solitude, avoiding the world beyond her cottage walls, until the day a young woman named Clara Dawson arrived in town. Clara was an aspiring artist with an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. She had grown up admiring Eleanor's work from books, studying the delicate brush strokes and vibrant hues that had once made the older woman a legend. When Clara learned that Eleanor lived in the very village she had moved to, she made it her mission to meet the reclusive artist. At first, Eleanor refused to entertain visitors. But Clara was persistent. Day after day, she left fresh flowers on Eleanor's doorstep. She wrote letters expressing her admiration, and on one particularly rainy afternoon, she sat outside the cottage, sketching until her fingers grew numb. Finally, after weeks of silent determination, Eleanor opened the door. "You're relentless," Eleanor muttered, her voice rough from years of disuse. Clara grinned. "I'd rather call it dedicated." Eleanor studied the young woman for a long moment before sighing. "Come inside before you drown in the rain." Thus began an unlikely friendship. Eleanor, despite her reluctance, found herself drawn to Clara's enthusiasm. She shared stories of her past exhibitions, of the cities she had traveled to, and the people she had painted. Yet, every time Clara asked why she had stopped painting, Eleanor would grow silent, her gaze distant. One evening, as the two sat by the fireplace, Clara asked again, this time more gently. "Eleanor, what happened?" Eleanor closed her eyes. "I lost my colors." Clara frowned. What do you mean? With a deep breath, Eleanor began to tell her story. Years ago, she had been painting a grand mural in Venice, a commission that would have defined her career. It was meant to capture the soul of the city, the reflections on the canals, the laughter of lovers in hidden courtyards, the glow of lanterns in the mist. But just days before its completion, a terrible fire broke out in the gallery where the mural was housed. Everything was destroyed. The painting, the sketches, even Eleanor's beloved brushes, all reduced to ash. The loss shattered her. She had poured her heart into that mural, and when it was gone, she felt as if she had lost a part of herself. Every time she picked up a brush afterward, the colors looked dull, lifeless. Nothing she painted felt real. So, she stopped. Clara listened, her heart aching for the woman who had given up her passion. But instead of pity, she felt a spark of determination. Eleanor, she said, voice steady, you didn't lose your colors. You just forgot how to see them. The older woman scoffed. And what do you suppose I do about that? Clara thought for a moment before smiling. Come with me. The next morning, Clara dragged Eleanor outside, forcing her to walk through the village she had spent years avoiding. At first, Eleanor protested, but soon, she found herself observing the world with fresh eyes. The rich blues of the morning sky, the golden glow of wheat swaying in the breeze, the crimson of a child's scarf, all colors she had ignored for far too long. Each day, Clara brought Eleanor to a new place. The bustling market, where spices painted the air with warmth, the tranquil riverbank, where willows draped their emerald arms into the water, the quiet chapel, where stained glass bathed the floor in kaleidoscopic light. And slowly, ever so slowly, Eleanor began to see again. One evening, Clara placed a blank canvas in front of Eleanor and set a brush beside it. No pressure, she said, just try. Eleanor hesitated. Her fingers trembled as they wrapped around the brush. The scent of fresh paint filled her senses, awakening something dormant. With a deep breath, she dipped the brush into a pot of deep cerulean and dragged it across the canvas. The stroke was shaky, uncertain. But it was a beginning. As the days passed, Eleanor painted more. First with hesitance, then with fervor. The colors returned not just to the canvas, but to her soul. She painted the market, the river, the chapel. She painted Clara, capturing the fire in her eyes, the laughter in her smile. And then, one day, she painted Venice again. This time, the painting was not a mural for a gallery, but a tribute to the city that had once broken her. The reflections, the laughter, the lanterns, all of it reborn in strokes of crimson, gold, and sapphire. When she finally stepped back to look at her work, Eleanor felt something she hadn't in decades. Joy. Clara stood beside her, grinning. You found them. Eleanor chuckled, tears pricking her eyes. I suppose I did. The painting was displayed in the village square, where people gathered to admire the return of their long-lost artist. But for Eleanor, the true masterpiece was not the painting itself, but the journey that had led her back to it. And as she picked up her brush again, she knew she would never lose her colors again.